When she handed me that check, I thought she was giving me freedom. Turns out she was setting a trap. One I didn't even see until it snapped shut around me. It started on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind that smells like burnt toast and brewed coffee. My husband, Daniel, was reading the newspaper at the table, his brows knitted in that serious, thoughtful way that always made him look older than he was. I was buttering bread, humming along to an old Anita Baker song on the radio. Life felt calm, predictable. We were 4 years into our marriage, still renting the modest little house just outside the city, saving for a home of our own. Then she called. Daniel's mother, Margaret. "Put her on speaker," she said, before I could even say hello. Her tone was crisp, the kind that cut through warmth like a blade. Daniel looked at me with that soft half smile, mouthing, "It's okay." So I pressed the speaker button. "I've been thinking," she continued, "you two should stop throwing money away on rent. You need something of your own. I want to help." I repeated help, careful not to sound too surprised. "Yes," she said. "I'm giving you some seed money. You'll use it for the down payment when you find the right house. I'll write a check, no strings attached." The words, "no strings attached," should have been my first warning. But when you've spent most of your adult life struggling, kindness, especially from someone who rarely offers it, can feel like sunlight on cold skin. Daniel looked thrilled. "Mom, that's incredible. Thank you." She chuckled softly. "Don't thank me yet, darling. Let's make it official when you visit next Sunday. I'll write the check then." After the call, Daniel pulled me close. "See, she's coming around. She's finally seeing you as family." I wanted to believe him. I really did. That Sunday, I wore my best cream blouse. Not fancy, just neat and soft. Because Margaret always noticed how I dressed. She lived in a house that smelled like polished wood and money, with curtains so heavy they seemed to silence the world outside. She was waiting for us in the sitting room, a silver pen in hand, her checkbook open on the glass table. I saw Daniel's childhood photos lined neatly on the mantel, him in school uniforms, graduation robes, and one with a gap-toothed smile holding a golden trophy. I was in none of them, of course. She never put up our wedding photo, though we'd sent her one framed in gold. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the velvet sofa. "I've decided to write the check in your name, Maya. You're the homemaker. You'll know what to do with it." I blinked. "In my name?" "Yes," she said, almost too sweetly. "It's a gift, from mother to daughter-in-law. I trust you." Her hand glided across the page, and she tore the check neatly before handing it to me. It was already signed, but the amount line was blank. "A blank check?" I asked, confused. She smiled, her lips barely moving. "You'll fill in what you need when the time comes. I believe in your judgment." Daniel grinned at me, squeezing my knee. "Wow, Mom, that's really generous." "It's just paper, but paper can build or destroy, depending on who holds it." I should have noticed the shadow in her tone, but I was too overwhelmed and, maybe, if I'm honest, a little touched. It felt like her way of saying, "I trust you now." When we got home, I placed the check in a small jewelry box in my dresser. Every time I opened that drawer, the crisp white slip of paper seemed to glow. It wasn't just money. It was acceptance. Proof that she'd finally welcomed me into her family. For months, we kept searching for houses. Prices were high, and we couldn't agree on location. Daniel wanted something near his office. I wanted a garden. Through all of it, the check sat waiting, a silent promise of a better future. Until one day, Margaret called again. It was late afternoon. I'd just come home from the grocery store when the phone rang. Maya, dear, she began, her tone unusually warm. I need a small favor. Of course. What is it? That check I gave you. Could you bring it by tomorrow? I need to take a quick photo of it for my accountant. Routine stuff. Nothing urgent. I hesitated. Okay, but why a photo? Oh, just for records, she said quickly. You know how taxes are. When I hung up, something in my chest tightened. It was subtle, like a whisper saying, something isn't right. But I pushed it aside. She'd been kind lately, even invited me for tea last week. Maybe this was just another formality. The next morning, I went over with the check tucked safely in an envelope. She greeted me with her usual poise, a cup of Earl Grey already waiting. The house smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers. Everything, as always, was perfectly in place. She took the envelope from my hands, glanced at it, and smiled faintly. Thank you, dear. Oh, before I forget, she said, pulling out a slim silver pen, could you just sign your name here? I froze. Sign where? Right here. She pointed to the line at the bottom, the same one where she had already signed her signature. I frowned, but I don't need to endorse it, do I? You already signed it. She met my eyes, and for a moment, her smile faltered. It's just for formality, she said quietly. My lawyer needs both signatures, just for clarity. You understand. My stomach nodded. But you said it was a gift. Yes, she said, still smiling, though her eyes didn't match. A gift between family. But family trusts, don't they? There it was again, that invisible test. I remember gripping the pen, the cool metal pressing into my fingers. I looked at Daniel's childhood photos behind her, the clock ticking softly in the background. My heart thudded. And then I said the one thing I never thought I'd have to say to her. Margaret, what are you really asking me to do? She leaned back, sighing. I'm asking you to prove you have nothing to hide. Her words hung in the air like a riddle I couldn't solve. Prove you have nothing to hide. I blinked, trying to process. Hide? From who? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she adjusted her pearl earrings, a nervous tic I'd only seen twice before. Once at our wedding, when she realized I didn't come from the kind of family she'd imagined for her son. And once at Daniel's graduation, when she had to share attention with his father's relatives. Finally, she said softly, Daniel tells me you've been looking at houses far above your budget. I felt my chest tighten. We were just looking. We haven't... Sweetheart, she interrupted, her tone gentle but cutting. When people start dreaming beyond their means, they make mistakes. I don't want that for my son. It hit me then. This wasn't about accountants or signatures. This was about control, about keeping her hand in every decision, even the ones she'd supposedly given up. I set the pen down on the table. I'm not signing anything today, Margaret. Not until I understand what this is. She gave a quiet laugh, the kind that carried more judgment than humor. My dear, this is how misunderstandings start. I'm trying to protect you. Protect me from what? I asked. Her gaze hardened. From yourself. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The clock behind her ticked louder, filling the silence with tiny, relentless clicks. I realized then she didn't trust me. Not with her son, not with her money, not even with a simple promise. That blank check was not generosity. It was bait, a test to see if I'd betray her trust by filling in a number she hadn't approved. I stood. You can keep your check. Her jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic. I'm not, I said quietly. But I won't be part of a game where I have to prove I'm worthy to be in this family. She said nothing as I left, just watched me go, her hands folded neatly in her lap, the check lying on the table between us, untouched, unsigned, and suddenly heavier than it had ever looked. When I told Daniel that evening, he frowned. You refused to sign? Maya, she's going to think you don't trust her. Daniel, I said softly, it wasn't about trust. She asked me to sign a blank check. Who does that? He rubbed the back of his neck. She is complicated. You know how she is about money. Yes, I said, my voice trembling, and she uses it to control everyone around her. He didn't argue, but I could tell he wanted to. He'd grown up believing his mother's love was something to earn. I think, deep down, he still wanted to prove himself to her, and that meant defending her even when she was wrong. We went to bed that night without resolving it. He turned his back to me, pretending to scroll through his phone. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how something as simple as a piece of paper had managed to wedge itself between us. A week passed before I heard from her again. This time, she didn't call. She came unannounced. I was in the kitchen making soup when I heard the knock, 3 firm raps that could only be hers. When I opened the door, she stood there in a navy coat, perfectly pressed, a leather folder tucked under her arm. Hello, Maya, she said evenly. I came to clear the air. I stepped aside to let her in, though my stomach churned. Would you like tea? No, thank you. She set the folder on the table and opened it with practiced precision. Inside was the check, still blank, along with a printed letter. What's this? I asked. My lawyer drafted an agreement, she said. It states that the check was given as a conditional gift, meant for a shared home purchase. I need both your signatures confirming that it won't be used otherwise. My hands went cold. Conditional gift? You said there were no strings. She smiled, but her eyes didn't soften. That was before I realized how quickly things can be misinterpreted. I have to protect my son's interests. Something snapped in me then. Not anger exactly, but a sharp, clean understanding of what was really happening. She didn't see me as her daughter-in-law. She saw me as a risk, a woman who might one day walk away with her precious boy's security. Margaret, I said quietly, you don't have to protect Daniel from me. We're a team. She closed the folder and looked me dead in the eye. That's what every woman says before she changes. The room went quiet again. I could hear the soup simmering softly behind me, the faint hum of the refrigerator. Every sound felt amplified, ordinary life trying to continue in the middle of something breaking. Then she gathered her things and said, You'll regret this, Maya. I was trying to help you both. When she left, the air in the house felt colder. I leaned against the counter, trying not to cry, but my hands were shaking. That night, Daniel came home late. His tie was loosened, his hair a little disheveled, a sign that he'd had a long day. I didn't want to burden him, but Margaret already had. She called you? I asked. He sighed. Yes, she said you were rude to her. I swallowed hard. Rude? She said you accused her of manipulation. Daniel, I stopped myself, realizing that arguing would only push him further away. What exactly did she tell you? He hesitated, then said that you refuse to cooperate, that you're keeping things from me. I let out a shaky laugh. Keeping what from you? A blank check? He rubbed his temples. Maya, please, you're turning this into something it's not. No, I said softly, my voice breaking. She is. He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. Not about his mother, about me. And that hurt more than anything she could have done. For the next few days, things between us were strained. He was quiet, withdrawn. When he spoke, it was careful, measured, as if every word might set me off. And I hated it, because I knew where that carefulness came from. His mother had planted seeds of distrust, and they were starting to grow. But something told me this wasn't the end of it, not by a long shot, because Margaret wasn't the kind of woman who let things go quietly. And when people like her feel cornered, they always find a new way to strike. The next weekend, Daniel's family was hosting a dinner, something his mother insisted on every few months. Usually, I went without hesitation. But this time, I hesitated at the door, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I'd chosen a simple navy dress, modest, elegant. My hair was tied back neatly. I looked calm on the outside, but inside, I was all nerves. Would she pretend nothing happened, or would she use the dinner to finish what she started? When we arrived, the house looked picture perfect. White lights along the walkway, soft music playing inside, and the scent of roasted garlic in the air. Everything about it screamed control. Margaret greeted Daniel with a warm hug. Then her eyes met mine. The smile stayed on her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Maya," she said sweetly, "you look lovely." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice polite. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. We sat at the long dining table, surrounded by laughter and stories. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Until dessert was served. That's when she spoke. "So, everyone," she began, her tone casual, "Daniel and Maya have been house hunting." I froze. Daniel glanced at me nervously. Margaret continued, "I tried to help them a little, but Maya refused my cheque." There it was, right in front of everyone. The humiliation served like dessert. A few of the relatives looked surprised. "Oh, really?" Aunt Ruth asked. "That was generous of you, Margaret." "Yes," she said, sipping her wine, "but apparently my help isn't trustworthy." A faint chuckle rippled around the table. My heart pounded in my ears. I could have stayed silent, kept the peace, but something inside me said no more. I looked up and said quietly, "I didn't refuse your help. I refused to sign something I didn't understand." The table went still. Her smile faltered for a second, then returned tighter than before. "My dear, if you had questions, you could have asked me directly. No need to make a scene." I stared at her. "I'm not making a scene. You brought it up." Daniel's hand brushed my arm under the table, a silent "please stop." But the damage was done. The relatives were whispering now. The warmth in the room turned cold. Margaret placed her fork down. "It's always the same, isn't it?" she said softly, looking at no one in particular. "You try to help, and suddenly you're the villain." I swallowed hard. "Help doesn't come with tests, Margaret." Her lips parted slightly. For the first time, she looked genuinely taken aback. Then she stood, excused herself, and left the table. We drove home in silence. The sound of the tires on the road was the only thing filling the space between us. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Why did you have to say that, Maya?" I turned to him. Because she humiliated me in front of everyone. What was I supposed to do? Smile and say thank you? He sighed. She's old-fashioned. She doesn't mean harm. I stared out the window. You keep saying that, but every time she does something cruel, you defend her. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence said it all. That night, I lay awake for hours, replaying every word at that table. The way she smiled when she said my name. The way Daniel looked torn between us. And then, the next morning, everything changed. I found an envelope slid under our door. My name was written on it, in neat, careful handwriting. Inside was a copy of the check, still blank, but attached to it was a note. Since you won't accept help, you'll have to learn the hard way. Let's see how long your pride pays the bills. My hands trembled. She had gone too far. That afternoon, I checked our joint account, and my heart dropped. The money Daniel's mother had gifted us for our wedding was gone, transferred out. She hadn't given it freely after all. It had been in an account she controlled all along. When Daniel came home, I showed him. He turned pale. He wouldn't. He couldn't. She did, I whispered. He ran his hands through his hair. I'll talk to her. But I knew talking wouldn't fix this, because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about power. 3 days later, we were invited to her house again, this time for a serious conversation. When we arrived, she was waiting in the living room, calm and collected. The check was on the table once again. I warned you, she said softly. You embarrassed me, questioned my intentions, and refused my gift. I had to remind you where that gift came from. Daniel stepped forward. Mom, this isn't right. She turned to him, her tone sharp. Don't take that tone with me, Daniel. I raised you better. He hesitated, then looked back at me. For the first time, I saw it in his eyes. Not confusion, not guilt, anger. Mom, he said, his voice low, you didn't just take money. You crossed a line. Margaret blinked. I was protecting you. No, he said, you were controlling us. The silence that followed was thick, the kind that marks a shift, a moment where something sacred breaks. He reached for my hand. We're leaving. Her eyes widened. Daniel, don't be foolish. But he didn't stop. He took my hand, and together we walked out. That night, we didn't speak much. There was nothing left to say. We knew this was the beginning of a storm, one that wouldn't pass easily. But for the first time, I saw Daniel clearly, not as his mother's son, but as my husband. And for the first time, she saw me, not as a threat, but as someone who wouldn't bow. Still, I couldn't shake one thought. If she was capable of this, taking money, turning family against me, what would she try next? Because Margaret wasn't done, and neither was I. 2 weeks passed, 2 long, quiet weeks. Daniel avoided calls from his mother. I kept myself busy with work, pretending not to check my phone every few hours. But silence, I learned, has its own kind of noise. It hums behind your thoughts. It whispers, something's coming. And something did. One Tuesday morning, as I poured coffee, my phone buzzed with a message from a friend. Maya, are you okay? I heard what happened. My heart stuttered. What happened? When I asked her, she hesitated, then sent a screenshot. It was a message circulating in one of the local community group chats, a message from someone calling herself a concerned family friend. It read, "It's sad when people marry for money and then turn on the hand that feeds them. Some women forget their place once they get access to the family bank accounts." I reread it 3 times. My coffee turned cold in my hand. I didn't need to ask who wrote it. The style, the phrasing, even the sanctimonious tone, it was her, Margaret. When Daniel came home that evening, I showed him the message. He stared at it, then looked up at me. "I'll call her." But before he could, his phone rang. It was his aunt, Ruth. I could hear her voice through the speaker. Loud, sharp, nosy. "Daniel, what's going on between you and your mother? She's saying awful things. People are talking. This isn't good for the family." He tried to calm her down, but his jaw was tight. When he hung up, he just sat there for a moment, staring at the floor. Then he said quietly, "She's turning everyone against us." I nodded. "Against me?" He looked up. "No, against us." That night, I cried. Not loud, not desperate, just quietly. The way you cry when something in you has broken, but you're too tired to pick up the pieces. Because this wasn't just a family argument anymore. This was war. The next Sunday, we went to church. The same church where Margaret had been a member for 25 years. Normally, I loved that place. The choir's voices, the faint scent of lilies near the altar, the sense of peace that filled the air. But that morning, peace had left the building. As I walked down the aisle, people turned. Whispers trilled behind me like smoke. "She's the one." I heard she made him choose between her and his mother. Imagine signing your mother-in-law's check. Each word hit like a pebble thrown at glass. I kept my chin up. I smiled when people looked my way, but inside I was trembling. After service, Margaret approached me, all grace and composure like a queen inspecting a rival. "Maya," she said softly, "how are you holding up?" Her tone was so gentle, so false, that I almost laughed. "I'm fine, but I see you've been busy." Her eyes glimmered. "I don't know what you mean." "You know exactly what I mean." She gave a small sigh. "You shouldn't take gossip so personally. People talk. You can't stop them." I leaned closer. "No, but I can stop you." She blinked, momentarily thrown off by my calm. Then she smiled again, that polished smile of hers. "You'll learn, dear. In this family, reputation is everything." Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor like punctuation marks to a lesson I hadn't asked to learn. By the time we reached home, I had made up my mind. If she wanted to fight with whispers, I'd fight with truth. I began gathering proof. Bank statements showing her withdrawals from our joint wedding account, screenshots of her texts, even the check she'd left with that threatening note. Daniel helped, quietly, though I could see it broke him inside. He said, "She's my mother," he said once, "but what she's doing isn't love." I nodded. Love doesn't humiliate, it builds. When we had everything, I went to someone I trusted, Pastor James. He had known the family for years. I showed him the evidence. I told him everything, every lie, every manipulation, every rumor. He listened, eyes heavy with sadness. Then he said, "Maya, you have a kind heart. Don't let her harden it, but you also have a right to clear your name." He promised to speak privately to the church committee, The same people Margaret had been whispering to. That was on a Wednesday. By Sunday, everything had changed. When I walked into church that morning, the whispers stopped. People looked at me differently, not with judgment this time, but with guilt. After service, Pastor James asked both of us, me and Margaret, to meet in his office. When we entered, she was already there, sitting straight-backed, pearls gleaming, expression cool as ever. "Maya," she said, "I didn't expect you here." "I didn't expect to be defending myself against your lies," I replied. Pastor James cleared his throat. "Let's keep this civil. Margaret, I've reviewed the information Maya provided. It seems there's been some misunderstanding about the financial situation." Margaret's lips tightened. "I don't know what she's told you, but—" He interrupted gently. "The documents speak for themselves." She glanced at me then, truly looked at me, and for a flicker of a moment, I saw something I'd never seen before. Not anger, not pride, but fear. "Margaret," the pastor continued softly, "you've done much for this community, but spreading rumors about your family, that's not the woman I know." She said nothing. Then he turned to me. "Maya, would you be willing to forgive and move forward?" I hesitated. Forgiveness. The word felt too light for the weight of what she'd done. But I also knew that forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. "I will," I said, finally, "if she can admit what she did." The room was still. Then slowly, Margaret lowered her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. "I may have said things I shouldn't have," she murmured. "I was angry. I thought I was protecting my son." I took a breath. "And you hurt me in the process." Her voice broke, barely above a whisper. "I know." For the first time, she looked small, human. And for the first time, I felt something other than anger. Pity. That evening, as Daniel and I walked home, he squeezed my hand. "You handled that with grace," he said. I smiled faintly. It wasn't grace, it was survival. He nodded. Maybe, but it was also strength. I looked up at the fading sunset, streaks of orange bleeding into gray. And for the first time in months, I felt peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had chosen myself. Still, I couldn't shake one thought. Margaret's apology had come too easily, too softly. Something told me this wasn't the end. And I was right. Because a week later, I found out what she'd done next. Something that would change everything again. A week passed. Daniel and I were beginning to find a new rhythm. Small things that felt like healing. Cooking dinner together. Watching late-night reruns. Talking about everything except his mother. But peace, I've learned, is fragile. Sometimes it only lasts until the next phone call. That call came on a Friday evening. I was in the kitchen when Daniel's phone rang. He frowned at the screen. "It's Mr. Gaines, Mom's financial advisor." He answered, and I could hear the man's voice, distant but urgent. "Daniel, I'm sorry to bother you," he said, "but there's been some confusion about your mother's accounts. We received an authorization request with your wife's name on it and your mother's signature." I froze. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. "She what?" Daniel asked, his voice rising. "Please, son, I'm not accusing anyone, but it's messy. The bank will need clarification from both sides." When he hung up, Daniel turned to me, eyes wide. She's trying to frame you. We drove to Margaret's house that night. Her lights were on. The living room looked the same, tidy, elegant, cold. She sat by the window, knitting, as if nothing in the world was wrong. When we walked in, she looked up with that same practiced smile. Daniel, Maya, to what do I owe the pleasure? Daniel didn't sit. Mom, what's this about the bank? Her expression didn't change. Ah, I see Mr. Gaines called you. Why did you tell them Maya forged something? She set down her knitting slowly, folded her hands. Because she did. I stared at her. You know that's a lie. She met my gaze, calm, almost pitying. You've always been ambitious, Maya. You wanted control, and when I didn't give it to you, you took it. My throat tightened. You asked me to sign that blank check, remember? You left it with me. She shrugged. That check wasn't meant for you to fill. It was a test, and you failed it. Daniel stepped forward, voice shaking. Mom, stop this. We both know Maya didn't touch your money. But she kept going, her tone cool, deliberate. Do you? Because someone transferred $5,000 from my account last month to a name I don't recognize, a small business account registered to Maya Benson Designs. I blinked. What? Daniel turned to me. Maya, did you? No, I snapped. That's not mine. I don't even own a business account. But Margaret smiled, like she'd been waiting for that. Then perhaps someone used your name. The room spun. My pulse roared in my ears. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was sabotage. We left soon after, before things could spiral. Neither of us slept that night. By morning, Daniel had called the bank. After hours of back and forth, they confirmed it. The account had indeed been opened in my name. Fake ID, fake signature, everything. The funds had already been withdrawn. It looked like fraud. I felt sick. She's setting me up, I whispered. She's actually doing this. Daniel rubbed his temples. We need proof, something that ties her to it. So we started digging. Emails, call logs, messages, anything. Then one afternoon, Daniel remembered something. Her old laptop, he said. She never uses it anymore, but she keeps everything. That evening, while Margaret was out at her weekly bridge club, Daniel used the spare key to get into her house. He found the laptop. It wasn't even password protected. He brought it home trembling. If we're wrong about this, he said quietly, then I'll never forgive myself. But if we're right? We opened it, and within 10 minutes, we found it. A folder named Family Affairs. Inside were emails to a man named Richard. They went back years. The messages were shocking, not just for their tone, but for what they revealed. Richard wasn't just anyone. He was her old business partner, the one Daniel had always believed she cut ties with decades ago. And in one of the emails, dated just 2 months ago, she wrote, Once Maya's out of the picture, Daniel will be vulnerable again. I can move the rest of the trust back without interference. He'll sign anything if he thinks it's to protect her. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Margaret hadn't been trying to test me. She'd been trying to ruin me so she could manipulate her son back under her control. Daniel just sat there, stunned. She planned this. All of it. The confrontation came that night. When she came home and saw us waiting, her face went pale. What are you doing here? She asked, voice tight. Daniel held up the laptop. We know, Mom. Her gaze flickered, just for a second, before she composed herself. Know what? That you faked an account in Maya's name, he said. That you tried to frame her. That you've been working with Richard, Her lips parted slightly, not in shock, but in realization that she'd been caught. I was protecting this family. That money, it was supposed to stay in the bloodline. You were letting her take control. I was letting her be my wife, Daniel said, his voice breaking. Not your puppet. For the first time, Margaret's calm cracked. Everything I did was for you. You think she loves you for who you are? Without my money, without this house, what would she want? I spoke softly but firmly. I wanted peace. You took that from me. She stared at me, eyes glistening, fury and heartbreak tangled together. Then she whispered, "You'll regret this," and walked out. That was the last night she spoke to us for a long time. Daniel filed a formal report with the bank. Mr. Gaines intervened, cleared my name, and froze the suspicious accounts. Within weeks, the investigation confirmed what we already knew. The transfers led back to Margaret's partner. Her reputation in the community collapsed quietly. She stopped attending church, stopped answering calls. And for months, our lives were quiet again. But quiet doesn't mean healed. Sometimes peace feels like standing in the ruins of something you loved, realizing the war might be over, but the damage remains. Months passed. Summer slipped into autumn, and the air turned cooler. The kind of quiet chill that makes the world feel slower, softer. Daniel and I began to rebuild what the storm had shattered. We moved into a smaller house across town, modest, with creaky floors and wild ivy crawling up the porch railings. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. There were mornings I'd wake up early, make coffee, and stand by the window, just listening to the birds outside. The world was calm again. But sometimes, calm feels almost too quiet after chaos, like silence after thunder. Peaceful, but a little sad. We didn't hear from Margaret for nearly 3 months. Then one afternoon, I got a call from the hospital. "Mrs. Lewis," the nurse said softly, "your mother-in-law was admitted last night. Mild stroke. She's stable now, but she asked for you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. Daniel was out of town for a work trip. I could have waited. I could have ignored the call, but something in me, maybe duty, maybe love that hadn't fully died, told me to go. When I entered her hospital room, she looked small. Her once perfect hair was gray and thin, her face pale against the pillow. The room smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers. She turned her head slowly when she heard me. "Maya." Her voice was weak, but still had that familiar sharpness beneath it. I sat down beside her. "How are you feeling?" She gave a faint, dry smile. Like karma finally caught up. I didn't reply. After a long silence, she said quietly, "They froze my accounts. Everything's gone. Richard disappeared." Her eyes welled up, and for the first time, I saw not the proud matriarch, but a lonely, frightened woman who had built her identity on control, and now had none. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't want to be left behind. After your wedding, Daniel stopped calling as much. You made him happy, and I didn't know how to fit in anymore. Her voice broke then. I thought if I could keep the money, I'd keep his love. But all I did was lose both. I sat there, quietly. The sound of her heart monitor filled the room, steady, fragile. Then I reached out and took her hand. It felt cold, paper thin. "Margaret," I said softly, You didn't lose him. You just forgot how to love without owning. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You should hate me. I did, I said honestly. But hating you only made me more like you. She blinked slowly, absorbing that. I'm sorry, she whispered. For the check, for the lies, for everything. I nodded. I know. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Just two women sitting in a quiet room, bound by pain, history, and something that looked a little like forgiveness. Daniel came the next morning. When he saw her, his eyes filled with tears. He held her hand and said, "Mom, I love you. Always have." She smiled weakly. "I know, son. I just wish I hadn't made you prove it." It was strange, watching the two of them talk, laugh a little, even cry. Strange, but healing. The woman who once tried to destroy me was now asking about my favorite tea, my garden, my new job. And though I'd never forget what she did, I realized something important that day. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about saying it's okay. It's about saying it happened, and I choose peace anyway. Margaret passed quietly that winter, in her sleep. At the funeral, the church was full. People who had once whispered behind my back now offered kind smiles and gentle words. Pastor James spoke beautifully. She was imperfect, but she loved fiercely, he said. And love, even when flawed, still deserves grace. After the service, I stood beside her grave. The sky was gray, the air cold enough to make my breath visible. Daniel slipped his arm around me. "She made a mess of things," he murmured. But I think she finally understood. I nodded, and so did I. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to let bitterness live rent-free in your heart. Years later, I found that old blank check in one of my drawers, tucked between photo albums and letters. The ink had faded, but her handwriting was still neat and proud. I held it for a long time. That piece of paper had once been a weapon. Now, it was just a reminder of how far I'd come and how much I'd survived. I smiled, folded it carefully, and placed it back. Some stories, I decided, don't need to be erased. They just need to be finished. And that's how it ended. A woman who once tried to break me became the reason I learned how to stand taller. A marriage once tested by deceit grew roots deeper than before. And a blank check, once a symbol of control, became a lesson in letting go. Life has a way of teaching you through pain. Sometimes the ones who hurt you most are the ones who show you who you really are. And I learned that my worth was never written on a check. It was written in how I faced what tried to destroy me. Would you have forgiven her if it were you? Tell me in the comments. And if my story touched your heart today, don't forget to subscribe for more true stories from Aunt Clara's Secret Letters.